Hello and welcome to this edition of Trans-European Division News, Good Conversation on the campus of Newbold College of Higher Education. Today I'm with Jonquil Hole, who worked at Newbold College from 1971 on and off through to 2004, and part of that was as a librarian or as the librarian in the college library. And we're here today on the 50th anniversary of the college library being built, the library you see on campus today. Welcome, Jonquil.
Thank you, David. Pleasure to be with you.
So in the early 70s, the college said, we need a library of great standing to recognise this place as a theological college.
Yes.
And of course, an appeal was given around the world to help. And associated with that was the Ellen White estate, was going to be a part of the library.
Yes, they were the tenants.
The tenants, all right, okay. And of course, we've just had an Ellen White celebration this weekend, symposium. And it's 50 years ago this weekend since the library was opened.
Who remembered all of that? And was the weekend as a celebration of that? Or did it just happen by chance?
I believe that Rory, the Ellen White director, chose this weekend because of the significance of the establishment of the research centre.
Yeah.
And so again, most of the weekend has been, well, all the weekend has been focused on the ministry of Ellen White.
Yes.
But we're recognising also, we didn't want to let this pass without recognising that the library has played an absolute pivotal role in the history of the college over the years.
Of course.
And I'm guesstimating it's served between 15 and 25,000 people, who knows, over the years. And we've got a story to tell.
Yes, yes.
So can you take us from the movement of the books, moving the books from Salisbury Hall into this new building?
Yes, well, we had a very talented team in the maintenance, and John Shimmin from the Isle of Man was the carpenter. And he and the other members of the team, which would have been Mr. Throssell and probably Ken Hayes, but I'm not exactly sure, made up these special book troughs, which were kind of L-shaped and long, and as I recall, had rope handles. And then the librarian in charge, which would have been Mrs. Throssell, must have measured the spaces on the new bookshelves, and then so many books at a time were loaded onto these book-carrying troughs. And it was in the Easter holidays, I imagine some of the students must have been press-ganged into helping carry books across, the ones who hadn't gone home for the holidays.
Do you remember the actual cutting of the ribbon on the opening day?
No, I don't remember anything about an opening ceremony. There must have been one. I've
seen it recorded in the May 17th edition of Messenger of that year.
Okay.
Then there is Roy Graham.
Yes.
And the president of the division at that time. Mm-hmm. And there was that picture, and we will show this online as we with this interview.
It was very interesting reading that Messenger issue.
And Dr. Beach's vision for the future. I have a dream, you know. I mean, you know, what a beautiful vision he had for the college in Europe, for how it could make an impact because of this library and the White Estate.
Yes, and I think they have worked very harmoniously as a team in promoting especially the theological studies of the college. Yes, it wasn't the most practical building at the beginning.
Nor the most beautiful piece of architecture either.
No, it wouldn't have won any prizes. You went down some rather steep steps to get to the entrance, and then through the first set of double doors, and there were the ladies' and gentlemen's toilets.
I've got to share something here. While I was at Newbold, I was responsible for cleaning those as part of my 4 hours free labour.
Oh.
I wouldn't have said anything, but you mentioned the toilets.
Then you went through a second pair of double doors, and there was the issue desk. A lot of the staff wives were employed in the library, my mother among them. And I think they found it a little embarrassing being at the issue desk with a procession of students going backwards and forwards to the facilities.
From your perspective, how do you feel the library's been valuable to the life of the college? It's almost a no-brainer, but what did you see?
I didn't see a lot of the students because I was a cataloguer in the back office, and Anne Turner was in charge of the desk, so she saw a lot more of the students. And Linda Baildam interacted with them as the interlibrary loan person. And of course, Per saw everything that went on Per Lisler. But I saw the enormous care that was taken in choosing books, because they all passed through my hands as I catalogued them. There were some amazing books that came in. Probably books are less important these days as there's so much available online. But there were some fantastic books, and once in a while Per would come into my cataloguing area and see me at the desk. And I had to say, he'd look at me, I would have to say, "Thou shalt not muzzle the ox that treads the corn."
Right.
Because these books were so interesting, I used to dip into them and have a look at what was being bought for the students.
Now, during your time, the library had already expanded, and for a section that just didn't involve theology, right?
Yes.
And so this is the wing, the east wing.
The original north wing.
Right.
Was just theology.
Right.
Upstairs. And downstairs were the Ellen G. White books next to the Ellen G. White Centre.
Yeah.
The new East Wing held all the general books and reference books, many of which, of course, were theological works.
So some of those books you dipped into. Just what stands out?
Oh, I can't remember now. I mean, I retired 20 years ago, David.
All right.
So I don't remember
I get it.
Which ones. There were history books, literature books, obviously a lot of theology books. I was particularly keen on the School of English books, which was a very small section, I have to say. And maybe it was the poor relation. But the School of English was very important because it was a feeder for the theology department and the other degree departments. People would come. I remember one in particular, a Swiss student who came. He knew no English whatsoever and started in English 1, worked his way through the School of English, went on and did theology here, and then went to Andrews and did his MA in theology.
Amazing.
So he would have used the library a great deal. Edwin Boxberger.
Yes, I was at college with him.
Oh, right. He's my prime example of somebody who was trained in English by the School of English and then went on to obviously use the library for his more advanced studies.
And did you see the nature of the students change over the years?
I can say the geographical spread of students changed. As for student nature, well, I've got to get through. I need this book. Let me hide it somewhere was not an unknown behaviour of students.
Right.
So if they knew that everybody wanted to read a particular book, they'd put a theology book, let's say in the English literature section, where they knew where it was, but nobody else did.
Oh.
And occasionally books were passed out of the window instead of going out through the door in the regular fashion.
That's at Adventist Theological College.
Yes, a friend of mine who worked in a law library said that law students were notorious for cutting pages out of texts. So I don't think the theology students were saints at that point. They might have become so later on.
We're growing in grace.
Yes, we're growing in grace. Yeah. And there's forgiveness for all of us.
So homing on research, how the library really helped a theology student with research. So I come to college, and basically my theological education has been the Sabbath school lesson, the Bible, the writings of Ellen White, and the odd religious instruction book. To be fair, I grew up in Oxford, and the church had a very good library from my Sabbath school teacher, who organised the library. And we had some really good books in our church library, and that was a model. But most of us who came to Newbold had a very limited worldview. It was an Adventist educational worldview in the local church. And then we're exposed.
Yes. For some, it was a painful experience, I think, because their minds were stretched sometimes further than they felt they could manage by their lecturers who wanted to get them to think for themselves. And the lecturers would choose a variety of books and put them on short-term loan. So those books were essential reading for the students. Latterly, I mentioned Linda Baildam and the interlibrary loan. She was a person who helped greatly if there was a particular article that was essential for the research that they were doing. This is for the more senior students. Maybe the lecturer would point out that that person had written that article and you really ought to see that. So the library would facilitate getting copies of these in hard copy in those days. I don't know if they're electronically sourced now, but this would enable the students to do more in-depth research with the books and articles that came from materials that were not held here in this library.
So is it true that when the library first opened, it wasn't really fit for purpose for academic research above BA level?
That is possible. And
it's not until the interlibrary loan service came that people doing their MA here could do some serious academic work.
Yes, I would think that was probably the case. The college started small and would have had a small library, and over its 120 odd years, it has had to expand to meet the needs of the students, the lecturers, and it will have provided more and more services so that higher studies could be undertaken. Yes, definitely, it will have expanded to meet the needs. I don't know what it does these days, as I've been long gone, but I'm sure it's still enabling research, and particularly now there's a lot of off-campus learning, I believe.
Yes. As I begin to conclude, the value of expanding the mind. In our denominational thinking, at times it feels as though we're not encouraged to think or to question. That's a reality sometimes.
That is sad. That is very sad if that's the case. In his closing remarks today, I think it was Daniel Duda, who is an alumnus of the college.
Yes, indeed he is.
Was also, a long time ago, a student of mine in the School of English.
Well, there's an admission.
Mentioned one of Ellen White's statements that kind of shocked me the first time I heard it. There is much that we have to learn. There is still much that we have to learn, and much that we have to unlearn.
There's three muches, I think, in that sentence. Yes, absolutely. It's a beautiful sentence.
That is, but let's emphasize the beginning of it,
right.
That there is much to learn.
So, as a Seventh Adventist Christian as a child, I was brought up to believe that we've discovered objective truth. And, where there was the truth package.
Yes.
Okay.
Not to be added unto or taken away from.
That's a long discussion, but anybody surely recognises that as long as there's breath left in you, there is a quest for truth.
Yes.
It is a journey to discover more until your last breath.
Yes. May I share somebody else's testimony that I heard in Salisbury Hall a month ago?
Yes, please.
Gunnar Pedersen, who was an emeritus professor of this institution, was also a fellow student of mine in the middle 60s. He was talking on the occasion of being presented with a Festschrift marking his contribution about his journey into studying theology. At this point, he studied theology. He was not yet a theologian. And in the early 70s, the Desmond Ford debates racked the church. And he said he was at Andrews at the time, and he was coming down the library stairs at Andrews. And he said, "There's a problem here. I need to study this." And he said he did a lot of reading, and eventually he read a lot of Ellen White to tie in this weekend's events. And he said, "I never solved the problem of Desmond that Desmond Ford raised, the problem dissolved. And he went on to speak very warmly of Ellen White and how her writings had given him this vision of the Bible as a whole meta-narrative, to use theology speak. Gunnar was a student here and used the library. Gunnar was a lecturer here and promoted the study of the library in the library. And I thought that was a very touching tribute to a wise woman, how the problem was not solved, it dissolved.
Indeed, indeed. We're all on a journey with Christ, with Jesus, and he's been with us on that journey for many a year. And while the library expands our mind, it's there to help us on our journey and our way.
Indeed.
How has it helped you?
The library?
Yeah.
Well, it employed me.
Yes, indeed. but having your mind open to ideas and philosophies.
Yes. I miss the availability of books. It's not easy for a layperson to get access to Newbold Library these days. When I worked there, I could just wander the shelves and find a book and take it out and read it. I wish I still had that access to the library. It expanded my understanding, and I hope it also expanded and strengthened my walk. And I enjoyed it enormously. We were a very close team in the years that I worked there, with Per and Linda and Anne, and we were like a little family. And that also is a strengthening part of one's Christian life, to realize this is a foretaste of what it will be like to be surrounded with the people who believe the same as we do and love our Lord and will live with him forever. So yes, it's a little heaven on earth, really, in the library.
And thank you for the reminder of the staff who have worked through the years and who you work
many.
And I want to pay tribute to them. And that's why we're doing this series of videos about this, to celebrate the 50th anniversary.
Yes, well, we can't forget Bill Schomburg.
Of course.
John Woodfield,
yes,
who is still with us at 107 and a half.
And I remember Dr. Dunton.
Dr. Dunton.
I had this picture that he'd been very involved in BUC life, very maxed out as education director. And, sometimes when you've sort of been dealing with people and all the issues of people, and then you come to books, and it's as if books were safer. And he used to walk around the library so happily and joyfully,
Yes.
And you just think, I can see why you've done that.
There are not very many librarians, as I remember it. I think they each had a very long tenure.
Yes.
And they each brought a specific vision and blessing of their own insights to the library.
What are you reading at the moment?
At the moment, Audrey was encouraging us, wasn't she, at the end of... I am partway through Ellen White's Sketches in the Life of Paul.
Beautiful.
It is.
Yes.
It is beautiful.
Jonquil, thank you for sharing with Trans-European Division News. It's been a real privilege.
My pleasure, David.
God bless you.
Thank you.